6 days after they took my hip out and put a titanium one in, I was on a couch in my own front room and I could not get to the bathroom without somebody helping me. My wife was in the kitchen on the telephone with her sister, and she did not know how far a voice carries in that house, and she said, "He just sits there. He is useless now, honestly." She was standing about 11 feet from me, on the other side of a wall. I framed myself in 2004. 5 months later, the government deposited $541,000 into my account, money they had owed me since 2013. If it had come in the fall instead of the spring, not one thing that follows ever happens. 24 years in the Army. I paid off their house, put both kids through school with no debt, bought them cars, and covered a mortgage that was never mine. And I asked my son for $20,000 one time in 32 years. Somebody tell me in the comments what you would have done with that money when it came, because I know what I did, and I have not been at peace with it for one day since. Subscribe while you are down there. I put one of these up every day. Hit like on your way past. My name is Emery Vandiver, and I am 61 years old, 24 years in the Army. I came in 1994, and I came out in 2018 as a Master Sergeant, and this is not a war story, and I am not that man. I ran motor transport. That means for 24 years I made sure other people's trucks ran. Convoy operations, maintenance sections, motor pools in 4 countries. I have signed for more equipment than most people will see in their lives, and I have never in my life fired a weapon at another human being. I say that because there is a version of a story like this, where the man is a hero, and I was a mechanic in a uniform, and about 80% of that army is men like me, and nobody makes a movie about us. I am from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is a thing about Army towns that people from outside them do not understand. You come here for brag at 19, and then 30 years later you are still here. I married Corliss Whitmore in 1997. She was 24 and I was 26, and we met at a wedding of 2 people, neither of us has spoken to since 2003. That woman moved 11 times for me. Fort Riley, Fort Hood, Germany twice, and the second time was for 3 years with a 2-year-old and a house with no air conditioning. Fort Campbell, back here twice. 11 moves in 21 years, and she never once made me feel bad about a single one of them. That is true, and it makes everything that came later something other than simple. I will give you one of those moves. Germany, 2004, the second time. Grafenwöhr. We had a 2-year-old and Renata was 4 months old, and the housing they gave us had no air conditioning and one of those German windows that tips instead of opening. It was 91 degrees in August, and I was gone for 11 days on an exercise. She put both of those babies in a bathtub of cool water twice a day for 11 days in an apartment in a country where she did not speak the language, and when I got back, she had made the place look like somewhere people lived. She had hung curtains. She had found a rug at a flea market in a town whose name I cannot pronounce, and carried it home on a train. I have thought about that 11 days a great deal in the last 2 years, and about the fact that the woman who did that is the same woman who stood on the other side of a wall in 2023. We have 2 children. Marcus Vandiver is 32. Renata is 25. Here is what I built, and I am going to lay it out in numbers, because numbers are the only honest way to say it. I paid off the house on Ransom Street in 2019, 22 years on a VA loan, and I made the last payment 11 months after I retired, and I did not tell anybody I had done it until Christmas. Both of those children came out of school with $0 of debt. There was a period in 2009 that I have to describe because it is the receipt on everything I just said. The economy did what it did, and Corliss lost the job she had at a title company in Fayetteville, and I was an E7 with 2 children and a mortgage. We did not exchange Christmas presents that year, not between the 2 of us. The children had presents, and neither one of them ever knew anything was different, and I did not miss a $529 payment in 2009, not 1 month. $211 into each of those accounts, 12 times. In a year, we ate a great deal of rice and beans, and I told my wife I was not hungry more than once. Marcus does not know that. Renata does not know that. Nobody knows that except a woman in Fayetteville who is married to somebody else now. I opened a 529 for Marcus in 2001 when he was 8 and one for Renata in 2003, and I put money in both of them every single month for 18 years, including the years we did not have it, including 2009 when Corliss and I did not exchange Christmas presents because there was nothing to exchange them with. Marcus went to North Carolina State. Renata went to Charlotte. Neither one of them has ever made a student loan payment in their lives, and neither one of them has ever thought about it for more than 4 seconds, and that is exactly what I wanted, and I would do it again. I bought both of them a car outright at graduation, not new, good, clean, low mileage, bought with cash, titled in their names. And in 2022 I co-signed Marcus's mortgage, $680,000, in a development off Providence Road in Charlotte. He was 29, and he had been in pharmaceutical sales for 4 years, and he was making about $140,000, and he did not qualify on his own, and the lender said the word co-signer, and I said all right. And then I started paying $2,100 a month toward that note. That was supposed to be for 1 year. That is what we said out loud at my kitchen table. 1 year, until the commission structure changed and he got the territory he was in line for. It was 3 years and 1 month when it stopped, and I am going to tell you exactly how it stopped. Now the injury, because everything in my life comes out of about 4 seconds in 2011. We were outside Kandahar. A logistics run, nothing unusual about it, and the lead vehicle hit an IED that had been in that road for some period of time. I was in the third truck. Nobody in my vehicle was killed. Nobody in my vehicle was seriously hurt. What happened to me is that the vehicle went over, and I went into the interior of it, hip first, and then I got out of it and walked around for 2 hours doing my job. I have to be honest about the next part, because it is the whole reason my family fell apart. Nothing was broken. They looked at me, there was a medic, and then there was an aid station, and then there was an x-ray, and there was nothing on it. 12 days of light duty and I was back on trucks. I walked away from it. That is the fact everything else grew out of. I walked away and there is no story attached to it, and for years when it came up I said it was nothing. What actually happened was a labrum tear and damage to the head of the femur that does not show on a plain film in 2011, and my body spent the next 11 years compensating for it. Here is how that goes, and if there is a man listening to this who is 50 and telling himself he is just getting old, listen to this part. 2013. My hip is stiff in the mornings. 2016. I have a limp. Not every day. Bad days. 2018. I retire at a medical board, and the board is for my back and my hearing, and the hip is a line item. 2020. I cannot stand at a barbecue for more than about 20 minutes. I started sitting down at things. I started picking chairs. 2022. I could not put my own socks on some mornings without sitting on the edge of the bed and doing a thing with my foot. There are 2 days in there I want to put in, because a limp is not a scene, and this is what it actually costs. Renata's college graduation, May of 2021, at an arena in Charlotte. You park a long way from those buildings. It was about a quarter mile from where we ended up, and I made it about 200 yards, and then I told my wife I had left something in the car. I had not left anything in the car. I sat in a parking deck on a concrete barrier for 11 minutes, and then I walked the rest of it, and I got there, and I saw my daughter walk. Corliss knew. She never said a word about it, and I have wondered since whether that was kindness or whether it was the first entry on a list. The second one was 2022. Marcus asked me to help him move into that house on Providence Road. I said yes. And then I sat in a rented truck outside that house for 4 hours, while my son and 2 of his friends carried furniture past me, and I was 58 years old, and at one point I got out and carried a lamp. A lamp. That is what I carried. Marcus said, "Dad, sit down, we have got it." He was being kind. He was absolutely being kind. And in the summer of 2023, an orthopedic surgeon at a practice on Village Drive put an image up on a screen and said, "Mr. Vandiver, there is no cartilage in this joint. There has not been for probably 3 years. You have been walking bone on bone." He said, "How are you doing this?" And I said, "I do not know, I just do it." The Army rated me at 20% for that hip in 2013. 20%, based on range of motion measured on one afternoon in 2013 when I was 49 years old and could still do most things. That rating never changed. It sat there for 10 years while the joint deteriorated, and I did not appeal it because I did not know you could, and because I was 49 years old and did not consider myself disabled. Understand what that number does. At 20% service connected for a hip, when I needed a total hip replacement in 2023, the VA classified it as degenerative joint disease rather than a service-connected condition requiring surgical intervention. Denied. I appealed the denial and the appeal was denied. The surgery, at the practice on Village Drive, quoted out at $61,000. I had about $19,000 in savings and a paid-off house. That is where this starts. That is the whole thing. $61,000. I asked my son for help in August of 2023. I have gone over that conversation about 400 times, and I am going to give it to you as close to exact as I can. He came to the house on a Saturday. He came because I asked him to, and he had not been to Fayetteville in about 5 months, which I had noticed and had not said anything about. We sat on the back porch, and I told him what the surgeon said, and what the VA said, and what the number was. And I did not ask him for $61,000. I asked him for 20. I had 19 in savings. Renata had said she would find something. I had a line of credit I could get about 11 on. I needed 20 from him, and I told him I would pay it back over 2 years, and I told him I would put it in writing. My son said no. He did not say no. That is the thing. He never said the word. He talked for about 11 minutes about the market. He talked about how the whole industry had gotten tight and how his numbers were down against a quota that had been raised. He talked about liquidity, which is a word my son used on my back porch. He said, "Dad, everything I have is in the house." And I said, "All right." And he said, "And honestly, the timing is terrible, because Q3 is when it all comes in, and right now I am carrying a lot." And I said, "All right, Marcus." And he said, "Can it wait? Is it the kind of thing that can wait 6 months?" I said, "The man says the joint is gone." And my son said, "Right, but they always say that." Then he stayed for lunch and we talked about the Panthers. That is the part that has stayed with me longer than the number. He stayed. He ate a sandwich his mother made, and he was in that house for another hour and 10 minutes, and he was good company, and he hugged me at the truck and said he loved me, and he meant it. A man can decline to help his father get out of a chair and then be pleasant about football for an hour, and there is no crack in him anywhere, and that is what I could not stop looking for afterward. I kept going back over that lunch looking for the seam. There is not one. 14 days later he was in Tulum. I did not go looking for that. Nobody sent it to me. It came up on my own telephone in the ordinary way, and I was sitting in a waiting room at the surgeon's office on Village Drive at the time. I was in that waiting room because I had gone in to ask about a payment plan. I know that because he posted it. 4 days, a place on the water, and there is a photograph of that boy at a table with 3 other people and a bottle in an ice bucket on it. I did not say anything about that, and I have never said anything about that, and I have thought about it every single day for 2 years. Renata sold her car. I did not know about that for 11 months. She told me she had a savings account from a job she had in college and that she wanted to do this and would not take no. She was 23 years old and making $46,000 a year at a nonprofit in Charlotte doing development work, and she sat at my kitchen table and lied to my face very convincingly for about 6 minutes. The car was a 2016 Civic that I bought her for graduation. Cash, clean title, 41,000 miles. She sold it in September of 2023 for $9,400. Then she took a personal loan for the rest of it at 14.9%, which is what a 23-year-old with no collateral and a nonprofit salary gets offered. She bought a car for $2,000 off a lot on South Boulevard that she had for a year and a half, and that broke down twice, and she drove that thing to work every day and never said one word about it to me. I found out in August of last year because a loan statement came to my house. She had used my address on the application because she had been between apartments in 2023. I opened it because I open my own mail. I sat at that table with a piece of paper from a lender in Charlotte in my hand, and I did the arithmetic, and then I went out to the garage and I could not come back inside for about 40 minutes. I have to say how the $61,000 actually got paid, because I have skipped it and it matters. $19,000 of it was my savings. That was everything I had that was not the house. $9,400 was a car in Charlotte that I did not know about. $6,000 went on 2 credit cards belonging to a 23-year-old that I did not know about either. $26,600 was a personal loan at 14.9% in my daughter's name. $0 came from my son. $0 came from my wife, who had a job at a dental office and an account of her own that she had been putting into since 2016 and which came out in the divorce and which had about $31,000 in it in October of 2023. I did not ask her. I never asked Corliss for that money, and I have thought about why, and the answer is that by August of 2023 I already knew what the answer would be, and I did not want to hear it out loud from my wife. The surgery was on the 11th of October 2023. It went fine. Total hip replacement, anterior approach. 1 night in the hospital, and I was home the next afternoon. I want to describe the first 2 weeks because it is where everything ended. You cannot do anything. That is the part people do not understand about a hip. It is not pain, it is that your body will not obey you. You cannot bend past 90 degrees for 6 weeks. You cannot put on your own socks. You cannot get off a couch that is too low, and my couch is too low, and I could not get off it without somebody putting a hand under my arm. For 6 days, that somebody was Corliss. And she did it. She did all of it, and she did not complain to my face one single time, and I need that in here. She helped me to the bathroom. She washed me. She put a chair in the shower, and she was in there with me. And I am 61 years old, and I have never in my life been more embarrassed than I was in that shower on a Thursday morning in October. On the 6th day, she was in the kitchen, on the telephone, with her sister Verlene. The kitchen is on the other side of the front room, and there is a wall between them, and I framed that wall myself in 2004 when we redid that part of the house, and I know exactly how sound moves in it, and she did not. And she said, "No, he is fine. He is on the couch." And then she said, "He just sits there. He is useless now, honestly." Then she said something else that I did not catch, and then she laughed. I need to be exact about the laugh because it is the whole thing. It was not a cruel laugh. My wife is not a cruel woman, and she was not making fun of me to her sister on a Wednesday afternoon. It was the laugh a person makes when they have said something true that they have been carrying around, and somebody on the other end has agreed with them. It was relief. That is what I heard through that wall. Not contempt. Relief. From a woman who had been thinking a thing for about 2 years and had finally said it out loud to somebody who did not argue. She laughed. I lay on that couch and looked at a ceiling I put up, and I did not say anything to that woman about it that day, or the next day, or ever. She filed for divorce on the 27th of October, 16 days after the surgery, 11 days after that phone call. I could not drive. I could not sit in a normal chair for more than about 20 minutes. I had a walker in my front room. A man from a process serving company came to my door on a Friday afternoon, and I answered it on a walker, and he apologized to me, and I told him it was not his fault, and I have thought since that he probably has that conversation a lot. Corliss was at work. That is how it was arranged, and I understood that immediately, and I have never held it against her, because there is no good way to be in a house when that happens. She came home at 5:30 and made dinner, and neither one of us said anything about it until about 8 o'clock, and then she said, "Did it come?" And I said, "It came." And she said, "Okay." That was the conversation. 28 years. She moved out 3 weeks later, on a Saturday, and her sister Verlene came with a van, and I sat in the backyard in a lawn chair for 4 hours, because I could not carry anything, and I could not watch it either. There is one thing about that phone call I have to add, and it is the thing that turned a bad sentence into the end of a marriage. She said it to her sister. Verlene Whitmore has known me since 1996. That woman has been at every Thanksgiving. She was in the delivery room in 1993 when Marcus came. She cried at my retirement ceremony in 2018 and hugged me and said she was proud of me. And on a Wednesday afternoon in October, My wife told her sister that I was useless, and her sister did not say one word back. I know that because there was no pause. Corliss said it, and then she said something else, and then she laughed, and a person who has been contradicted does not move that fast. So it was not one sentence in one bad week. It was a thing those two women had said to each other before, and it had a shape already, and I was hearing about the 40th version of it through a wall. She had been seeing a man from her church for about 2 years. His name is Delroy Pittman, and he is 59, and he sells insurance, and he had been at my house. He was at Renata's graduation party in 2022. He shook my hand at a cookout in my own backyard and complimented the ribs. I found that out in December, from Verlene of all people, who told Renata, who did not want to tell me, and told me anyway, because she is the only person in that family who has ever told me anything. 2 years. That means it started in 2021, when the limp was getting bad and before it got worse, and I have had 2 years to think about what that means, and I have landed somewhere I do not enjoy. I do not think Corliss Vandiver left me for that man. I think that woman was 49 years old and had moved 11 times and had spent 5 years watching her husband slow down, and somewhere in about 2021 she made a decision about the next 30 years, and she found somebody, and then she waited. She waited until that hip was fixed. That is what I cannot get around. She could have gone in 2022. She could have gone in the spring of 2023 before any of it. She stayed through the diagnosis and the denial and the appeal and the surgery, and she washed her husband in a shower on a Thursday, and then she filed 16 days later. I have decided that was not cruelty. I think she believed she owed me the surgery, and that once she had given it to me, the debt was clear. She got me through it, and then she left, and in her head those two things go together and make her a decent person. That is worse. I want somebody to understand why that is worse. The divorce ran 11 months. North Carolina requires a year of separation before an absolute divorce, and we ran that clock from the 27th of October. I moved into a rental on Rose Hill Road in November because I could not stay in that house, and I was 60 years old with a walker in a 2-bedroom rental with a card table for a kitchen table, and November and December of 2023 were the 2 worst months of my life. Renata came every weekend. Every single one, from Charlotte, 2 hours each way, in a $2,000 car she bought because she sold hers to pay for my hip and had not told me. Marcus came twice in 11 months. Once at Christmas for about 4 hours. Once in March for a thing about his mother's storage unit. He called about every 3 weeks, and the calls were about 11 minutes, and he was pleasant on all of them. And on the first of every single month, $2,100 left my account and went to a mortgage servicer in Ohio for a house in Charlotte with my son's name on it. I kept paying it, through all of it, through the divorce, through the rental, through the card table. I have been asked why by 4 different people, and the honest answer is that I could not work out how to stop without it being a statement, and I was not ready to make a statement. There is a longer answer, and it is worse. $2,100 a month was the last thing connecting me to that young man. If I stopped it, we would have had nothing. No reason to call, no mechanism. There is a version of a father and a 32-year-old son in this country where the entire relationship is a bank transfer on the first of the month, and I was in it, and I knew I was in it, and I kept paying because a transfer was better than nothing. That is the truth, and I have not enjoyed sitting with it. Now the appeal, and this is where it turns. In February of 2023, before any of the rest of it, I had filed a claim for increase with the VA on that hip. I did it because a man at the VFW on Bragg Boulevard named Purcell Ashby Kane looked at my paperwork one afternoon and said, "Emery, who rated you at 20%? I said, "That is what they gave me in 2013. And he said, "And what year did you say you cannot put your socks on?" Purcell Ashby Kane is 74 years old, and he did 2 tours in Vietnam, and he sits in a room at that VFW 3 days a week at a folding table with a laptop his grandson set up for him. He does not get paid. He is accredited through a veterans service organization, and he has been doing it since 2001, and he has, by his own count, filed about 1,100 claims. I had been going into that building for 6 years. 6 years of walking past a folding table with a sign on it that said Veteran Service Officer, and I never once stopped. I was going in there for the bar. Purcell is a Veteran Service Officer. Those exist. They are free, and about 11% of the veterans in this country know it. He filed that claim for me in February of 2023, and he did it properly. 11 years of imaging. The surgeon's records. A statement from my old first sergeant about the 2011 rollover. My own statement. And then he did the thing that made all the difference and that I did not understand at the time. He also filed for TDIU, total disability, based on individual unemployability. That is a designation for a veteran who cannot maintain substantially gainful employment because of service-connected conditions, and it pays at the 100% rate regardless of the scheduler rating. I said, Purcell, I am not unemployable. I do not work because I retired. And that man said, Emery, when did you last stand up for a full day? I could not answer him. I sat at a folding table and tried to think of the last time I had been on my feet for 8 hours, and I could not get to a year. He said, that is what I thought. Then he said something I have repeated to about 9 different men since. He said, Emery, the VA is not going to come to your house and tell you they have got you wrong. That is not a thing that happens. Somebody has to walk in here and ask. What Purcell put in that file is the reason it worked, and it was not luck. 11 years of imaging, which I did not know I had, every X-ray and every MRI from 2013 forward, pulled from 4 different systems, and he did all of that with release forms and a fax machine. The operative report from October, which showed what was actually in that joint when they opened it, which is a different category of evidence than a picture of it. And a buddy statement from my old first sergeant, a man named Wendell Cawthon, who is in Alabama and who I had not spoken to since 2016. Purcell tracked him down. I did not ask him to. He found a man in Alabama and got him to write 2 paragraphs about a vehicle rollover outside Kandahar in 2011 and sign it in front of a notary. Wendell Cawthon called me after he mailed it. First time in 8 years, and he said, Vandiver, I did not know you got hurt in that. And I said, I did not either. The claim was denied in June of 2023. The appeal was filed in July. It sat for 20 months. 20 months is October of 2023 through March of this year, and I want to put those months side by side with what else was happening, because the 2 of them ran at the same time and neither one knew about the other. October 2023, the surgery, the couch, the wall. November, served and moved into a rental. December, found out about Delroy Pittman. January, my first Christmas alone, which was actually December, and I am putting it here because I did not do anything about it in December. March 2024, mediation. August 2024, I open a loan statement addressed to my daughter. October 2024, the divorce hearing on property. July of this year, divorce final. And the entire time, in a building in Washington, a file with my name on it was in a queue. Nobody was doing anything wrong. That is the part that is hard to be angry about. It was in line. My marriage ended and my daughter went into debt, and my son said no to me. All of it inside the 20 months that a file was in line. That is not unusual. That is completely ordinary, and every veteran listening to this already knows it, and everybody else needs to hear it. 20 months is not a scandal. 20 months is a Tuesday. The decision came on the 11th of March of this year. Purcell called me. He got it before I did because he is my representative of record, and it hit his portal first. He said, Emery, are you sitting down? I said, I am always sitting down, Purcell. And he said, they granted it. 100%. And they granted TDIU. And it is retroactive. I said, retroactive to when? And Purcell Ashby Kane said, to your original effective date, 2013. The deposit was $541,000 and some change. That is 12 years of the difference between what they paid me at 20% and what they should have been paying me, plus the TDIU rate running from my medical retirement in 2018. It is not a settlement. Nobody sued anybody. There is no defendant. It is money the United States government owed me since 2013, and had not paid because a man measured my range of motion on one afternoon when I was 49 years old and put a number on a form. I sat in a rental house on Rose Hill Road and looked at a bank application on a telephone. I did not celebrate. People assumed there was a moment, and there was not. I put the phone face down on a card table. Then I got up and I washed 2 dishes that were in the sink, and I wiped the counter, and I stood at the window of a rented kitchen looking at a driveway. And then I sat back down and picked the phone up and looked at it again, because a part of me thought I had read it wrong. $541,000, and the only thing in my head was a date, the 11th of October. And the only thing I could think about, and I mean the only thing, was the 11th of October, 2023. 5 months. If that decision had come in October of the previous year instead of March of this one, I write a check for $61,000 and nothing else happens. My daughter does not sell her car. My daughter does not sign a personal loan at 14.9% at 23 years old. I do not sit on a back porch and ask my son for $20,000 and get 11 minutes about liquidity. And I do not know whether my wife files or does not file, and I am never going to know that, and it is the one piece of this I would actually like an answer to. Every single thing that broke my family broke inside a 5-month window over $61,000, while $541,000 sat in an appeals queue in Washington with my name on it. Let me stop for 1 second, because we are coming up on the part I have never said out loud in one piece. If you are still here, subscribe. I put a new one of these up every single day. Hit the like button on your way past. And tell me this in the comments, because I have never worked it out. She got me through that surgery and then filed 16 days later, and I think she believed she had done the right thing by me. Is a person like that cruel, or are they something else? I read all of them. Corliss found out about the money in April. I did not tell her. Nobody in that family told her. Purcell Ashby Kane filed a form with the VA, changing my dependent status because we were separated, and something in that system generated a notice, and her attorney got a copy. She came after it. Her attorney filed a motion in May to reopen the equitable distribution portion of the case, on the theory that a retroactive payment covering the period of the marriage was marital property. And here is where a woman found out what a document actually says. My attorney is a woman named Odessa Bellwether Frame in Fayetteville, who does about 80% military divorces, and who has been doing it since 2001. She filed a 4-page response, and I sat in that courtroom in June and watched a judge explain it to Corliss's attorney in about 9 minutes. Federal law says VA disability compensation is not divisible marital property. It cannot be divided in a divorce. Not the monthly payment and not a retroactive award, because a retroactive award is compensation for disability, not deferred earnings. There is a Supreme Court case about it from 2017, and there is a federal statute, and there is not any argument. Her attorney knew that. I am certain her attorney knew that in May, and filed anyway because the client insisted. There is a thing that happened in that courtroom before the ruling that I have not been able to put down. We came in at the same time. Not together. She came in the other door with her attorney, and I came in with Odessa, and there is a hallway on that floor where both doors let out, and for about 4 seconds, the two of us were standing 11 feet apart in a hallway. And Corliss said, "Hey, Emery." Just that. The way she has said it about 10,000 times in 28 years. "Hey, Emery." And I said, "Hey." 28 years of marriage and 2 children and 11 moves. And that is the entire content of the last conversation I have had with that woman, in a hallway on the 4th floor of the Cumberland County Courthouse. Then we went into a room where a judge explained to her that she was not entitled to my disability compensation. I watched Corliss's face while the judge said it. She was sitting 11 feet from me in a blue jacket I bought her in Germany in 2007. And what went across that woman's face was not disappointment, it was arithmetic, and I know the difference, because I watched her do arithmetic at a kitchen table for 21 years about money we did not have. She was recalculating, in real time, in a courtroom, at 52 years old. The divorce was final on the 11th of July. She got half the equity in a house that was paid off, which is a real number, and which I do not begrudge her $1 of, because that woman moved 11 times and she earned every cent of that house. She did not get one penny of $541,000. I stopped paying my son's mortgage on the 1st of August. I did not announce it. I did not call him and explain. I logged into a bank on the 29th of July and I canceled a recurring transfer, and it took about 11 seconds. 3 years and 1 month, $76,000 if anybody is counting, and I counted. He called me on the 4th of August. He said, "Hey, I think something happened with the transfer." And I said, "No." He said, "What?" I said, "Nothing happened with it. I stopped it." There was a pause on that telephone, and then my son said, "Okay," and then he said, "Is everything all right? Are you okay for money?" That is the first question that man asked. Is your father all right for money? And I said, "I am fine, Marcus." And he said, "Okay, well, is this permanent or is this a cash flow thing? Because I need to plan." I said, "It is permanent." He said, "Dad, that is $2,100 a month." And I said, "I know exactly what it is." Then I said the only hard thing I said to my son in that entire conversation. I said, "You told me on my back porch that everything you had was in that house. I have been the thing that was in that house. Now it is you." And I hung up. There were 4 weeks between that phone call and September, and I did not hear from him at all. Renata did. She told me later that her brother called her 3 times in August, and that 2 of those calls were about me, and one of them was about whether she thought Dad was all right, meaning mentally. That is a thing people do. When a man finally says no after 32 years, the first explanation everybody reaches for is that something is wrong with him. She told him nothing was wrong with me. She told me, she said, "Marcus, he asked you for $20,000 in August and you went to Mexico." And she said her brother was quiet for a second and then said, "That is not fair," and changed the subject. He came to Fayetteville on the 6th of September. I knew he was coming. He texted the day before and asked if he could come by, and I said yes. And I sat in that rental on Rose Hill Road for 24 hours, knowing what was walking through the door. He looked bad, I will say that. He had lost weight, and he had not slept, and my son is a man who takes care of how he looks, and he had not shaved. He sat on the couch in that rental, and he said he was in trouble. The house was listed. He had listed it in August, and it had been sitting for 3 weeks in a market that had gotten soft, and he had bought at the top in 2022, and he owed more than the listing price. He said he had a credit card situation. He said the word situation. And then he said, "I heard about the VA thing." I said, "From who?" And he said, "Renata mentioned it." Renata did not mention it. I asked her afterward and she went white and said she had never said one word to her brother about my money, and I believe her, and I think Corliss told him, and I have not asked. Then Marcus Vandiver said the thing he came to say. He said, "Dad, I know I handled the surgery thing wrong. Handled it wrong." And he said, "I was in a bad spot, and I did not understand how serious it was, and I should have found a way, and I am sorry." And then he said, "And I would not ask, except I am about $11,000 short of getting out from under this house without it going to foreclosure. $11,000. I sat in a chair across from my son and did an arithmetic I did not want to do, and here it is. I asked him for $20,000, and he gave me 11 minutes about liquidity, and then he flew to Tulum. He is asking me for $11,000. I said no. I did not make a speech. I have thought about that a great deal, and I am glad of it, because everything I had to say would have been for me. I said, "No, son." And he said, "Dad." And I said, "I have got nothing else for you today." He sat there for about 11 seconds, and then he stood up and he said, "So that is it." And I said, "That is it for now." He stopped at the door, and he said, "Was it the trip?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Mexico. Was that it? Because I had booked that in June, Dad. It was paid for before you ever asked me." That is true. I checked afterward, which I am not proud of. He booked it on the 11th of June, and I asked him for money on the 19th of August. And I said, "Marcus, I know when you booked it." He said, "Then what?" And I said, "You were sitting at a table in Mexico with a bottle of wine in a bucket on the 2nd of September, and I was on a couch, And I had asked you 2 weeks earlier, and you told me everything you had was in your house. He said, I could not have gotten a refund. I said, I know that too. Then I said the last thing I said to my son that day. I said, you did not have to cancel a trip. You had to think about me while you were on it, and you did not. And that is not something a person can go back and do. He left. He did not slam anything and he did not say anything ugly, and he got in his car and drove back to Charlotte. The house went to a short sale in November. He is renting in a place off Tyvola. He has called 4 times since September. I have taken 2 of them. Both of those calls were about 11 minutes, and both of them were pleasant, and neither one of them contained an apology or a request. And I have come to understand that he is doing the thing he thinks reestablishes a relationship, which is to be normal at me until enough time has gone by. He is going to keep doing that. He is 32, and it has always worked before. The 2 I did not take were in October, and I did not take them because I was not in a condition to be pleasant back, and I would rather not answer than be short with my son on a telephone. That is where it is. That is the whole current status, and it is not resolved, and I do not know what it turns into. Now, Renata, and this is the part I have been working up to. I found that loan statement in August of last year, which was 7 months before the money came. I did not tell her I knew, and the order matters. For 7 months I knew that my daughter had sold her car and taken a loan at 14.9% and had been driving a $2,000 Corolla to work in Charlotte, and I did not have the money to fix it, and I did not tell her I knew, because there was nothing I could do except make her feel found out. That was the worst 7 months. Not the divorce, not the couch. 7 months of watching a 24-year-old drive 2 hours to see me in a car with a check engine light on, knowing exactly why, and being unable to do one single thing about it. The money came on the 11th of March. I paid that loan off on the 12th. The payoff was $19,200 and change, because she had been paying on it for 18 months at 14.9% and had barely touched the principal, which is what that rate does. I called the lender myself and paid it over the telephone with a man named Devante, who had no idea what he was participating in. Then I called my daughter. I said, Renata, I need you to come home this weekend. And she said, Daddy, is everything okay? And I said, everything is fine. There is something about that Corolla I have to say. It was silver, and it was a 2009, and it had 191,000 miles on it, and there was a dent in the rear quarter that was there when she bought it. The check engine light came on in about January of last year and stayed on. She drove that thing from Charlotte to Fayetteville and back, 2 hours each way, every single weekend for 11 months, in the winter, at night, on 74 and then I-95. I stood in a driveway a lot of Sunday afternoons, watching my daughter drive away in that car, and I did not know why she had it. I thought she had made a bad decision with money. I thought about offering her something, and I did not have anything to offer. That is what I mean about the 7 months. It is not the knowing. It is going back through 11 months of Sunday afternoons afterward with the correct information. She came on Saturday. She parked that Corolla in the driveway of the rental on Rose Hill Road, and she came in and she was talking about something on the way in, something from work, and I let her get all the way to the kitchen, and I put the payoff confirmation on the counter. She looked at it and she did not say anything for a second, and then she said, Dad. And I said, I have known since August. And my daughter put both hands over her face and stood in a rented kitchen and cried in a way I have only seen her cry twice in her life. And then she said, through her hands, she said, Do not be mad at me. Do not be mad at me. That is what that girl said. She sold her car for her father's hip and took a predatory loan at 23 years old and hid it for 18 months, and the first thing out of her mouth was, Do not be mad at me. I said, Baby, come here. We stood in that kitchen a while. There is one more thing about that Saturday. After she stopped crying, we sat at that card table for about 2 hours, and she told me the whole thing, in order, the way she does. She told me she had gotten $4,000 from the loan company and $9,400 for the car, and that she had been $6,000 short and had put it on 2 credit cards. I did not know about the credit cards. That was new information at that table, and I had to get up and go stand in the kitchen for a minute. And then she told me the part that finished me. She said she had gone to Marcus first. In September of 2023, before she sold anything, my daughter drove to Charlotte and sat in her brother's kitchen and asked him to go in with her. She said she had about 9 and could get to 20, and she asked him for the rest. And he told her the same thing he told me. He talked about the market, and about Q3, and about being carried. She said, and then he asked me if I was sure Dad was not being dramatic about it. She was 23 years old and she sat in that kitchen and heard that, and then she went and sold her car and did not tell either one of us. I bought her a car on the 18th of March. Not a Civic. A 4-year-old Lexus with 31,000 miles on it, and I bought it because she would never have bought it for herself, and because I wanted her to have a thing that was better than what she gave up. She fought me about it for 4 days. She actually fought me, harder than her brother has ever fought me about anything. She said it was too much. She said she did not do it to get something. I said, I know you did not. That is the whole reason. And there is one more thing, and she does not know about it, and she is not going to for a long time. There is a trust. Odessa Bellwether Frame set it up in April, and it is irrevocable, and it is funded with $300,000. And Renata Vandiver is the beneficiary, and she does not know it exists. I did not tell her because I have watched what money does when a young person knows it is coming. She is 25 years old and she works at a nonprofit for $46,000 a year, doing development work for a housing organization, and she is good at it and she loves it. I am not going to be the reason she stops. She will find out when she is 35, per the terms, or when I die, whichever is first. There is a version of the trust conversation with Odessa Bellwether Frame that I should describe, because she pushed back on me and she was right to. She asked me in April whether I was making a permanent decision inside of 6 weeks of a large deposit. I said probably. And she said, Mr. Vandiver, I do this for a living, and the number of people who restructure an estate in the 90 days after something happens to them and then come back to me in 2 years is very high. I said, all right, then build it so I can change it. And she said, that is the point. The trust for your daughter is irrevocable because you want that protected from you. The will is a will. You can change a will any Tuesday you want. Then she said, and I would like you to come back and look at it in a year. I went back in April of this year. I sat in that office and I read the whole thing again with 12 months on it. I did not change one word. Marcus is not in that document. He is not in my will either. I want to say something about that, because I have been asked about it by the 2 people who know, and both of them asked me the same way, carefully. I have changed my mind about it twice. Once in December, on a Sunday, when he called and I took it, and he sounded bad, and we talked for 11 minutes about nothing, and I hung up and sat there and thought, he is 32 years old, and he is going to be 62 one day, and I will be dead. And once in February, when Renata told me he had asked her whether Dad ever talks about him. Both times I got as far as writing myself a note about calling Odessa, and both times I did not call. I did not disinherit my son to punish him. I disinherited my son because I have watched what my money does to him. I put 3 years and $76,000 into a house he could not afford, and it did not make him careful. It made him comfortable, and he flew to Tulum 14 days after telling his father he was carrying a lot. That is not a moral failure that money fixes. That is a moral failure that money feeds. If I leave that man money, he will be 45 years old with a boat and no idea, and there will be nobody left to say no to him because I will be dead. So the answer is no, and it is not a punishment, and I have never been able to explain that to anybody in a way that sounds like anything other than a punishment. Corliss married Delroy Pittman in October. I know, because Verlene told Renata, and Renata told me at a kitchen table, because she does not keep things from me anymore. And I said, all right, and asked her about her job. That woman is 52 years old, and she is married to a man who sells insurance in Fayetteville, and she has half the equity of a house on Ransom Street. I do not wish her badly. I want to say that, and I want it to be believed, and I understand that a man saying it on the internet is not the most convincing thing in the world. She moved 11 times for me. She had 2 children with me. She sat in a hospital in Landstuhl in 2004 when I had something else entirely, and she did not sleep for 2 days. And she stood in a kitchen on the other side of a wall I built and said I was useless while I was 6 days out of an operation, and both of those women are the same woman, and I have not made that fit, and I am not going to. I sold the house on Ransom Street. That was in the settlement, and it had to go, and it went in September, and I want to describe one thing about that day. I walked through it before the closing. Just me, on a Tuesday morning, with the keys in my hand. I stood in the front room where the couch was, and I looked at that wall. I framed it in 2004 with a man named Odell Prentice, who I worked with at the motor pool, and who is dead now. 2 weekends. We did it wrong the first time, and had to take the top plate off and redo it, and we laughed about that for years. I put my hand flat on that wall for a second, and then I went outside and closed the door and gave the keys to the agent. I bought a place in Hope Mills in October. 3 bedrooms, 1 story, no steps. I paid cash for it, which I have never done for anything in my life, and the closing took 19 minutes, and I kept waiting for somebody to hand me a payment book. Renata helped me move, her and 2 men from the VFW that Purcell sent without asking me, one of whom is 71 years old and carried a box spring, and I could not stop him. There is a room in that house I have not put anything in. 3rd bedroom. It has a bed in it and nothing else, and I told Renata it was a guest room, and she looked at me and did not say anything. She knows what that room is for. I know what that room is for. It has been empty 14 months. That was deliberate. I picked a house with no steps at 61 years old, and if you had told me at 49 I would be doing that, I would have laughed at you, and now it is the single smartest decision I have made in 10 years. There is one more thing I did with that money, and it is the only part of any of this I am unreservedly glad about. I gave $100,000 to that VFW post on Bragg Boulevard. Not to the post, exactly. It is in a fund, and the fund pays a full-time accredited veteran service officer, and there is one now, 4 days a week, at a desk, with a door on the office, instead of a folding table by the bar. His name is Ignacio Farrell Boyce, and he is 38, and he did 8 years, and he has filed 140 claims in 11 months. Purcell Ashby Kane still comes in 3 days a week for free, and works next to him and will not take $1, and I have stopped arguing with that man about it. I did not put my name on it. It is named after Odell Prentice, who helped me frame a wall in 2004 and who died in 2019 at 59 years old with a claim that was never filed. The hip is good. That is the thing nobody expects at the end of this. It works. There was a morning in June of this year that I want to put in because it is the only thing in 2 years that got me. I got up at 5:30 the way I always have, and I stood up off the edge of the bed and walked to the kitchen and started the coffee. And I was about halfway through pouring it when I realized I had not thought about it. Not one time. Not the hip, not the first 4 steps, not the thing I used to do with my foot, not any of it. I had gotten out of a bed and crossed a house, and my body had not asked me for anything. I stood in a kitchen in Hope Mills with a cup in my hand at 5:40 in the morning, and I had to put it down on the counter. 11 years. That is what got taken, and I did not fully understand the size of it until it came back. I walk about 3 miles a day, and I have not used a cane since February of last year, and I got up off the floor last month without thinking about it, and then sat back down because I wanted to see if I could do it again. 19 years of that joint getting worse, and 11 months of hell, and $61,000, and it works. And if I had been able to pay for it in 2021, I would have gotten those years back. That is the actual cost of a 20% rating on a form in 2013. Here is what I would leave you with, and there are 2 things. The first one is practical, and if you are a veteran or you love one, this is the only part of this that matters. Go and see a veteran service officer. They are free. They are at the VFW and the American Legion and the County Veterans Office, and they are not the VA. They work for you, and there are about 11,000 of them in this country, and most veterans have never spoken to one. I was rated at 20% for 11 years. 11 years. And a man named Purcell Ashby Kane looked at my file for about 9 minutes in a room with folding chairs in it and said, Emery, who rated you at 20%? That question was worth $541,000, and it took 9 minutes, and it was free, and I could have asked it in 2014. I did not ask because I did not think I was the kind of man who needed help with a form. 24 years of signing for other people's equipment, and I could not walk into a room with folding chairs and ask a question about my own paperwork. The second thing is about my son, and it is not what people expect me to say. Everybody who hears this wants to know when Marcus turned. They want a moment. They want to know what happened to that boy. And the answer is that nothing happened to him, and the turn was not a turn. I paid for everything he ever had, 0 debt out of NC State, a car at graduation, a co-signed mortgage he did not qualify for, and $2,100 a month for 3 years toward a house he lived in like he had earned it. And then I asked him for $20,000 one time, on a back porch, in August. That was the first time in 32 years that man had ever been asked to give something up. The first time. At 32 years old. And he was not able to do it, and I have had 2 years to be angry about that, and what I have arrived at, instead, is much worse, which is that I did that. I built a man who could not do it, 1 tuition payment and 1 car and 1 mortgage transfer at a time, over 32 years, out of love, and every single one of those decisions was the decision of a father who wanted his son to have it easier than he did. Renata had the same childhood and turned out different, and people bring that up every time I say this. They are right, and it does not settle it. It makes it harder. I have thought about the differences, and there are 2, and neither one of them is a comfort. The first is that she was second. By the time Renata was 15, I was 50 and tired, and there was less money, and I said no to her more often, and I said it without agonizing about it, and she got the version of me that had run out of the energy to make everything easy. The second one I only worked out this year. Marcus watched me get everything I wanted. He was 11 when I made Sergeant First Class, and 18 when I made Master Sergeant, and 21 when we paid that house off, and every single thing he saw his father do worked. Renata was 12 when the limp started. She grew up watching a man lose something slowly and keep going to work about it, and she is the one who sold her car. I do not know what to do with that either. My daughter sold her car. My son gave me 11 minutes about liquidity and flew to Mexico. And the only difference I can find, when I lay their lives side by side, is that Renata was the second one, and I was tired by then, and I said no to her more often, because I had less to give and less patience, and she got the worst version of me. She got the worst version of me, and she turned out better. I do not know what to do with that. I have been sitting with it for 2 years, and there is nothing to do with it. And if there is a young father listening to this with a small child and some money, I do not have advice for you. I have got a warning, and it is not the same thing. If you got something out of this one, subscribe before you go. That is the one that actually matters. I put a new story up every single day, and the next one is already written. Hit like on the way out. It genuinely helps this reach the people it is for. And in the comments, tell me the honest thing, not the kind one. My son is 32. He lost the house, and he has called 4 times since September. Should I have given him the $11,000? I read every single one of them. I will see you in the next one.